And we are live on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050. WTKA online at the big1050.com. And the MGoBlog Roundtable is here. Brian Cook, how you doing, man?
I'm better, I guess.
You're better?
Yeah.
You're better? Craig Ross, how you doing? You still in Kona?
I'm still in Kona. We're leaving. We'll be back Tuesday night.
Bring some good weather with you.
What's the weather like there?
It's clearing up a little bit. We had snowflakes yesterday, so bring some good weather with you.
Yeah.
And Seth Fisher, how the heck are you, man?
Well, like Michigan's 3-point shooting, I've bottomed out, and I'm kind of on the mend. I'm on the return. I mean, I'm coming. Starting today, we're coming back. I'm going to get a new tooth, so I'm not going to have this big gap in my mouth like I've been playing hockey. My shoulder's starting to feel a little bit better. Hopefully next week they'll let me drive again. So I'm coming back.
Yeah, you do sort of look like someone has rammed you into the boards there. I mean,
yeah, and then something from one of Brian's kids managed to make its way over to West Bloomfield too, so that went through my house last week. And then my mother-in-law just had knee replacement surgery, so my wife's been living at her house. So it's been a mess, but we're coming back.
Yeah,
we're coming back.
Well, hopefully Michigan's shooting stroke comes back, fellas. There's some news in between. So I've been catching it from Sparty's talking about, hey, they can't shoot. And then all of a sudden they come out against Michigan, they shoot 40%, and Michigan can't throw it in the ocean. Dusty said after that loss, he said, yeah, we obviously shot it poorly in this game, but he noted, Brian, he said, we haven't really shot it well for a few weeks now.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they haven't, and that's just sometimes how a season goes. Like, if you look at Michigan State, there's really no good reason that their 3-point shooting is something like 330th in the country, because they have guys who are coming back from last year who are good shooters, and their free throw percentage is very high, and they don't run offense such that they're always taking like heaves. Like, they're not completely dysfunctional on offense. They run good stuff, they get good looks, and they've just been unable to shoot at all this year. And I'm just reminded of that season where Tim Hardaway Jr., his sophomore year, where a guy who was going to be a first rounder in the NBA draft because he could shot like 29 or 28% for the season. So it just kind of feels like there's some yips going around, and there's kind of a lack of confidence. And Roddy Gale is like
1 for 22 in 2025.
Yeah,
wow.
So he's almost.
I have him 1 for 24 in the Big Ten, so he's under 5% from 3 in the Big Ten right now.
I didn't know that bad. Good grief.
Yeah, and so they managed to get him some looks sort of in between in that mid-range in the Nebraska game, and he actually led Michigan in scoring. Not that there was a whole lot of scoring to talk about, but yeah. So these things happen, and shooters find their level, and I think Michigan has enough shooters that they're going to find their level, and they'll bounce back from this rough spell. But man, it's like, one nice thing about the basketball team this year was they reminded me of the football team in no way whatsoever. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. Yeah, offense can't do things bad.
Yeah, the most important guy. I mean, yeah, it's a big deal that Roddy. You want Roddy to get on track. You want all their, but Trey, like he's got to be. Especially with there not really being a consistent guy to relieve him. He's got to be a guy they can find a rudder with consistent. He's got to be a lead guy for them. And really going back to what maybe the Indiana game, so that's like 4 games ago, hasn't really played that well. I mean, he came out strong against Purdue, Seth, but if you remember, after that game, Dusty, he was quite pointed in saying, I don't think Trey played well in this game. So he gave him something out off the rip. But then you remember he played LJ. He played Kason big minutes in that game. So they really need Trey to get on track.
Yeah, they do. And, Trey has not been the worst shooter. Nebraska, all of a sudden, he went off the rails too. They've been playing without Sam Walters, who I know only gets 10, 12 minutes a game normally, but he's one of their better shooters. So you take that guy off the field. Reuben Jones, he was never a bad shooter in his career, and he's struggling too. So it's not just Trey, but I think that Trey is the guy that they kind of relied on when nothing else is working. And he was someone who just go in the lane and he'll just go and get a bad bucket, right? Michigan does not get a lot of bad buckets. Everything's at the rim. Everything is or a wide open three. And here's another cascading issue with missing threes. Michigan's transition defense against top 100 teams is 323rd in the country. So they're not a good transition D. And one of the ways that teams get out in transition against them is off of clang threes, right? Like that ball comes out, you're going for an offensive rebound, and all of a sudden the other team is running out. Michigan State did that to them a lot. So Michigan's giving up 42% of their points off transition right now. Their defense is locked down when they can get back. So those transition opportunities are are being created off of missed threes. So you're going from like a possible 3-point play for you to 2 or 3 points the other direction. Also, the spacing has just gotten terrible. And I think this is part of Trey Donaldson's problem. It's not really his fault. It's Roddy Gale's, because they're just packing the paint now. There's a screenshot I got from the Nebraska game where nobody's within 12 feet of Roddy Gale, who's outside at the top. Now that's your shooting guard, and he's not making his shots. And that's because he can't shoot him, because all he can do is drive. They're just packing the paint, and then Trey Donaldson can't really go into the paint because they're just going to go in there with him, right? So we're left with the big-to-big play, and that's going to generate turnovers, and that creates runouts. So it's just a cascading issue that goes away really quickly for this team. This team that turns the ball over a lot, right? But the return for those turnovers is they get out, they get good shots. If they can't make those good shots, that's a really big problem. And Rutgers is the perfect team to get right against, because Rutgers is small in the middle. They're going to have a lot of help, and Rutgers is going to score a lot, so you're going to have to keep up. So this is an important night to get over 40% for the first time since before they played Rutgers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to hear Dusty talk about the quality of looks. He said, hey, as long as the ingredients are there, we're getting inside out ball reversals, guys are hitting them in practice, because he was talking about Roddy hoisting some early, and I remember seeing that. I was like, ooh, do we really want to? I didn't even know the stats were like one for 24 for what, which obviously you got to add Nebraska to it. But heading into Nebraska, I didn't know they were that bad, but he hoisted those early ones. I'm like, wow, does he have a green light to do that? But Dusty says he's hitting them in practice. So as long as those ingredients are there, he said, basically keep shooting them, even Roddy Gale. So if the ingredients are there, he's saying eventually they'll start falling. Hopefully that's the case tonight. What I would like to see, Danny as a screener. They were getting some good looks for Danny off of him as a screener, getting some threes. I would like to see him take more of those opportunities when he gets them. And then Danny in the post, maybe being able to, because a lot of their inside out threes, or all of them essentially, come from Vlad in the post, or if it's not, and the only one is really creating them off of penetration is Trey. So maybe Danny could give you some of that too if you post him some, because I don't really think that your only other option would be Will, and I don't know that teams really respect him like that, but I think they would Danny. These are other ways in which maybe you can generate some more looks, but definitely we've seen Danny as a screener create looks. I think we should see some more of that.
Well, this team, I just don't know right now. The Nebraska game until the Michigan State Maryland game last night was, one of the worst games I've seen in a long time, at least from an offensive perspective. And it was just ugly basketball. And so I just don't know. We're 14th in the conference in shooting threes. We're last in turnovers. We're 17th in generating turnovers. It just feels like we're going in retrograde. Maybe that's what happens in the course of seasons, that things ebb and flow. But it doesn't.
Well, if you remember last year, Ohio State, they were terrible from three in the middle part of their season, and that got their coach fired. And then they got hot from three, and one of the guys was Gale. Gale was really hot from three at the beginning of the year last year, and then was terrible in the middle of the season. And then I think he got shot like 33% down the stretch. But that was why they started winning some games, because like their 3-point luck just flipped, and that's why they hired Diebler instead of going after FAU's coach. Wonder what happened to that guy. But that was like the story of their season. Now, the other part of the story of Michigan's season is their defense has actually gotten a lot better. They were, I think, 14th in the conference in defense at one point, and now I think they're climbing right up towards the top. They had a really good game plan against Nebraska, and a really good game against Nebraska. Other than transition, they were fine against Michigan State in the half court. You had the Purdue game as well, so you're seeing them getting a lot more physical on defense, and it's working. They're using their size. They're losing Reuben Jones hurt because he was actually playing really well defensively. But everyone's kind of come around on defense, and they know each other better now. So I think that's been what's keeping them afloat, and why they keep on winning these games by 2 points or whatever. Because the D is really locked in, and that Nebraska performance defensively was awesome.
Yeah, the one thing I will say that was positive for me was Michigan was minus 11 in shots in the Michigan State game, and the biggest part of that, as Brian has said before, the turnovers are probably just baked in. We were -4 in turnovers, although we were up 2 turnovers at halftime, and in a game where if we make free throws, we're probably up by 8, 9, 10 points at the half, but we were terrible at the free throw line. But in the second half, we lost turnovers 8-2, but over the entirety of the game, we got beaten up on the offensive boards. And to be honest, Vlad was the biggest culprit. I watched the game in super slow-mo, and he's just and he's good on the offensive end. I know he's active on the offensive end, but he gets stuck in cement on the defensive end and starts reaching for the ball. And so Michigan State, who's very active and athletic, just blew by him or pushed around him sometimes to get offensive rebounds. Now, in the Nebraska game, that wasn't the case. And it seems to me like May probably made this a point of emphasis with Vlad, that he's got to move his feet a little better on the defensive end and box out a little better on the defensive end. And I think he did fine in the Nebraska game, and that was one sort of upside I saw. One thing's for sure: you can't lose in the turnover game like this team is quite likely to do, and get killed on the offensive boards and have good chances of winning games. You can't give up 11 more shots like they did against Michigan State and beat that team. But I thought that certainly was better in the Nebraska game.
Well, and yet, saying all that, I was heartened by their ability to win that abomination of a game Monday night. It was a game that, talking to Tim about it, he predicted they would win against Michigan State and then lose against Nebraska because they just would not be able to go in there and recover quick enough. He thought it would be the mental recovery that would be the struggle. I thought it would be the physical recovery, and seeing their lack of legs in that game, which is what I thought was an issue. I think the physical part of it was the toughest part. They were missing bunnies in that game, but they gutted it out and they got a victory. As ugly as it looked, doesn't matter. It was a notch in the win column, and so they come home, and let's see if you can start getting some fixes shooting. But the big picture, to kind of bury the lead, they signed Dusty to the extension, much to the chagrin of the Hoosier faithful, who, Brian, moments after it was signed, like if you go to Peegs.com, there are actually people on the site who are like, oh, it means nothing. Doesn't mean anything that he signed the extension.
I mean, there were most people knew what the writing on the wall was, but there were also people who were like, oh, the buyout's only $7.5 million. We can swing that. And I'm like, well, if you wanted to go to Indiana, why would he make it tougher?
Right.
Like, and then Norlander gets a direct quote that's like, I'm staying here. And they're like, all right, I guess so. And I mean, I always thought that's the way it was going to go because, Dusty May chose this job over Louisville. And the reasons that he chose this job over Louisville are similar to the reasons that he would choose the Michigan job over Indiana. Mm-hmm. And he's already got a team that's at the top of the conference. He's probably going to return almost everybody who's not a center on next year's team. So he's got Trey McKinney coming in. He's obviously able to recruit. I think the NIL stuff that Indiana was asserting was a little fanciful. Like Michigan couldn't make up the money gap with the University of Indiana. Come on, bro. But so yeah, it always felt like something where it wasn't really going to get underway, especially because like he's got a season, right? He's competing for a protected seed in the tournament, and he doesn't want the distractions. He doesn't need distractions. And also, he's just not the kind of guy who is motivated by having the biggest contract. And the other thing I saw on that message board was a lot of people saying like, I mean, he didn't do a good job negotiating here. And then one of his quotes to Norlander is like, I don't care about that stuff. I just want to coach basketball. And I believe that. And I think, with Indiana in the rear view, I would be surprised if Dusty May wasn't Michigan's head coach in basketball 10 years from now, 15 maybe.
Yeah, dude got a $1 million raise. I think that moves him above Kevin Willard. I think he's top 3 in the conference now, and he hasn't. You got Izzo ahead of him. I mean, you aren't gonna move ahead of it. You aren't gonna move ahead of guys who've been to like the championship game. So that's what Painter, Izzo. You're gonna move ahead of those guys. There are only like a couple guys in the league making more than him now. I have to pull up the stats, but yeah, you got a good bump. Now the buyout doesn't become exorbitant, but at the end of the day, that gets increased too. And he tells Indiana no, outright, without being a prick, without being a without being a jerk about it. Like, he's just a nice guy. He isn't gonna come out and say, hey, I don't want to come to you guys. He's just gonna be real chill about it. That's what happened.
I think there's a misconception among fan bases about how these things work. It's not like he and Ward sat down at the bar and hashed out their contract, right? They were sitting at the bar while their attorneys hash out. So Ward has somebody who does this and Dusty has an agent who does this. So Dusty's job is to set the priorities. And from the conversation they had, it's clear what his priorities were. Sure, get me some more money, right? The agent's got to do that because the agent's got to get paid for his work too. But also, you wanted more NIL and more and just more support for the program. And I think that's going to end up being more than it was in the than it was going to be originally. And I think that Michigan is going to be top 3 in the conference in paying their basketball players, especially from the $20.5 million they have to disperse from the House settlement, because Michigan just Ward just did an interview with you guys, an exclusive interview with TMI, and one of the things that came out of that was, what are they going to do with the with their $20.5 million, I think is what the number is now. And they said 75% is going to go to the football team, and the rest is going to be split with the basketball team and the women's basketball team. Sorry, hockey. But that was interesting to me, because I think that's a fairly high number for your basketball program. That's a very big commitment for your basketball program. Now Michigan's going to make up money for the football program in other ways, but that was compared to what other teams are looking at, 12%, 20% is what I've seen from other teams. That's a pretty high number, and I wonder if that was part of the negotiation.
Yeah, I'm looking at the salary, and I think Izzo is at 6 point. Then this is obviously base. I don't know what the bonus information is, but Izzo is at like 6.2. Different sites are saying are factoring in the bonus language. But yeah, Dusty's up there now, and so I don't know. They're talking about it being they said this is a bad contract. This is a bad deal that he signed, and I'm thinking if that's the case, that's the epitome of a cell phone, Indiana fans. He signed a bad deal. What does that tell you about you? He signed a bad deal. Does that tell you that he does not want to come home? He does not want to be there.
You have to understand, in these it's not about the number. Okay, the number is there for the agents. The number is there. I don't really care if he's third or fifth or sixth in the Big Ten as far as what he's earning, because the difference at that level between making 3.4 million or 4 million is really not that different in your lifestyle. What is different in your lifestyle, if you're a basketball coach, is how much money your players are getting, how much interest the program has in being a basketball school, in promoting what you guys are doing and making sure that you are the stars as opposed to the secondary thing after football. And I think that from his conversation, from the numbers that we're looking at, and then from that number from the interview, that really stood out to me, that Michigan is going to make a commitment to its basketball program, which, if I'm Dusty May, that's probably what I care about most.
Yeah, so Tom Izzo is 6.2. I'm pulling up the USA Today stats, and it's not sorted by conference, but Izzo is at the top of the Big Ten at 6.2. The next highest Big Ten coach, if I go down the list, it's got to be Painter. I just got to get to him.
That's fair.
Which would be, actually, it looks like it's probably. You guys can talk as I find it on the.
What about the guy at UCLA?
Mick Cronin.
Cronin?
I think he's getting a lot of money.
Yeah. So Mick Cronin.
Yeah, he should be getting Lakers money, right? He could be coaching the Lakers right now.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is not the most interesting thing about the.
Right. I mean, to me, we said this before. None of us thought that he was taking off for Indiana, and for me, the biggest thing was it doesn't feel like him. It doesn't feel like Dusty May to come from Florida Atlantic to be here for 1 year and then decide I'm going someplace else, even if it is a place he's been before. And so I was always highly, highly skeptical of that, and that he would go to Indiana. And I also thought Ward Manuel would do what he needed to do to keep him, because he has, a fragile enough relationship perhaps with much of the fan base. So this was always, by Indiana fans, an unrealistic vision. And we said that before, and for a change, we were right. So it's good.
Yeah. Great news. I think the dude I think he's that guy, man. I think it's just a matter of time before Michigan is in the Final Four and obviously competing for a championship. I think he checks all the boxes. The difference that he makes compared to some of these coaches that were just compared to like some of these some of these names that we've seen in recent years, even compared to Juwan. I think Juwan could coach. I think Juwan couldn't assemble a roster. And I think that's going to be the challenge for a lot of these guys. Can you assemble a roster in general manager fashion? You got to be able to do that. And Dusty can do that.
You got to do that at Michigan. I mean, one of Juwan's biggest problems, they couldn't get Terrence Shannon in the program.
Yeah, and it's even bigger challenge at Michigan, to your point.
Yeah.
Even bigger challenge at Michigan to be able to do that. So
Yeah.
Mike Woodson couldn't do that in Indiana. I remember watching them put together that class, that portal class that they have now. They spent all that money. I think they spent the most money. And look at what it got them. Now maybe they go on a run. Maybe they finish the regular season on this run and actually make the tournament. That could actually happen. But it's not what they expected given the amount of money they doled out. They thought they'd be much better. I looked at it and said, "Where's the shooting?" It just didn't seem like the pieces were going to fit together in a way that you would think it would, given again the amount of money that they spent. So,
my guy at Iowa said that they had one more piece that they were really expecting to get, and that was Frankie Fiddler. And then Michigan State came in with a big offer that they just blew them out of the water. So I think that was sometimes in basketball, right? You shoot from the moon and you're expecting to get this one guy. And there's only 5 guys on the court. So one guy is a humongous difference for your team. So sometimes that's just what happens, right? Like you go after one dude, and Fiddler has not been like, he's been a bench guy for Michigan State, but that was kind of where their thinking was, if you're wondering.
Yeah.
Well, Fiddler was supposed to be a shooter, and last time I checked, he was under 20% from 3. So I'm not sure that Fiddler was turning.
He's another one of those guys at State, though, who's
fortunes
so
around.
I mean, before we get to the break, just to wrap this up, I mean, Michigan Rutgers tonight. What do you guys expect?
I mean, I expect it to be close. Last time they did not have Dylan Harper, and that was a close game, but that was at the Rack versus at Chrysler, and I think Michigan's going to have to actually shoot to win this game.
Yeah, their 2 centers are 3 centers now. 2 freshmen, a JUCO guy, and the JUCO guy was supposed to be out for the season with a knee injury and miraculously made it back. Now he's not playing very much yet, but so they're basically down to 2 true freshmen. Both of them are very pushable, so they need a lot of help on the inside. So Rutgers is going to score. I mean, they got 2 lottery picks. They got the 2nd, 3rd overall pick probably. And those guys can score from anywhere. Harper's going to take doubles. And that's one thing Michigan got away with at the Rack, is they could just double Ace Bailey. And once they did that, there wasn't a whole lot of offense that Rutgers could generate. So they're going to have to double Harper. Everyone has to do that against Rutgers this year, and that's going to open up shots, and Rutgers is going to score. Can you score with them? Now they're going to help on the inside, which means there's going to be open threes. Can you shoot a 3? There's our question.
Right.
I don't disagree with that. It's, are we going to begin to shoot the ball sometime again? And if we are, we'll win. If we don't, we won't. It's probably that.
I mean, they come home. There's the schedule. We knew this going in. The schedule is very crunched at the end of the season, right? They got a game every 3 days. They got 4 games in 10 days here. And there's, Nebraska game was right after the Michigan State game. It's one after another. Every 3 days, there's going to be a game. They need that protected seed, because the Big Ten tournament is the only time they're going to get a little bit of a break. And then they'll go right into the NCAA. So, they're probably a little tired. That's probably contributing to the shooting issues, but it's not going to stop, right? You got Illinois, you got Maryland, and you got Michigan State at the end of the season. So this is the easiest game they got left, but this is the opportunity. They're going to have wide open looks. Hopefully they're going to get Walters back eventually. Maybe they get Reuben Jones back. He was gone for a game, and get healthy, get locked in, and start shooting the ball better at home, because they got this homestand for 3 games before you got to go to Michigan State for that big game and then get the tournament. So this is the night.
All right. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I'm not going to beat my own particular dead horse again, but I don't think they're tired. I don't think their legs are tired. It has nothing to do with shooting. Nothing.
You don't think in the Nebraska game, the quick turnaround?
No.
In the Nebraska
nothing.
game, you don't think it affected
Nothing.
him?
No.
Craig doesn't get tired, and he's 3,000 years old, so
I mean,
he doesn't believe 22-year-olds have it in them to get tired.
I don't think so. Not in games which don't, which are a lot less energy than practices. So I don't believe their legs are. I mean, this is something announcers say that just isn't true. But my opinion.
I got you. All right, we got to get to a break. We'll be back on the other side here. More MGoBlog Roundtable on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTK, online at thebig1050.com.
Clear on the radio.
I'm glad we didn't mention the fact that Paul Sells now has a distinction to never be tied or broken. He's the only ref who's teed up Dusty May and John Beeline.
It's unbelievable. And
He ejected Beeline.
So I heard, I'll tell you what I heard. I don't know if this is true.
Yeah.
I heard he teed Dusty up for waving him off.
What?
Now I don't know that again.
How does that comport with like
I
the kind of stuff that Izzo's gotten away with for 30
I have
years?
not confirmed that. That's why I have not confirmed that.
Well, I watched the tape at 16th speed because I'm trying to figure out what the hell happened here. And
because I can't imagine, to your point, Brian, it's like you got Raven Lunatic on the other side.
Yeah.
What could he possibly have said that would get you to tee him up?
Yeah, I mean,
Sam, he didn't say anything. The ball's coming up the court and Sells is 65 feet away from him. Sells is all the way down in the other corner, and the only ref close to Dusty is Serrato, and Serrato's unconcerned, and you can see what Dusty does. He makes a noise, a motion like goaltending. He makes the goaltending motion with his hand. Sells 65 feet away, decides that's worthy of a tee.
So wait. Back up again, Craig.
Yeah.
Because this kind of is along the lines of what I was. So what happened again?
There was a goaltend, offensive goal. Now I don't like that rule, but it was an offensive goaltend by Michigan State, and May stands up and walks along the sidelines, not on the court, towards the middle of the court. And Larry Serrato, who's a good ref, is walking right near him and is unconcerned by whatever's going on. Sells, who's all the way in the other corner, 65 feet away, approximately from sees May do the goaltend signal. You know how refs do this, saying, "Hey," and that's what May does. He makes that motion, that the goaltend.
Also,
when Sells sees that, he tees him
wrong.
So
the call was completely wrong. The ball
was wrong. I know.
Obviously out of the cylinder. Like it didn't end up mattering, but that was just 3 points that Paul Sells just decided Michigan didn't deserve to have.
Well, he also decided that this was a Sells call. The and one on Vlad he took away. That's 3.
Two of them on the same trip.
Yeah,
one of them was Serrato, but
it definitely has something to do.
The Serrato one was plausible on that, but not the Sells one.
Back in about a minute.
Yeah. And then the Jeffrey Anderson, who was like mostly comatose the whole game and has been for years, decides at the end of the game when it's 62-68, when Roddy Gale gets shoved and then tripped in the lane, and when he gets tripped, he throws a brick up and goes in, and he waves that off for traveling, which A, it was not, and B, he was tripped. And you can see it quite clearly on the. Well,
I also enjoyed in the Nebraska game when they went to the. We can talk about this when we come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't.
It was definitely the wave.
It was the wave. He did this. He was saying goaltend, and Sells is such a and it's so noisy in there. I mean, my brother said it was the loudest he ever heard Chrysler, and he said it was so noisy in there.
Stand by, guys. Back in
There
about
was
10
nothing
seconds.
he was saying that was gonna be heard anyway.
South can't do.
And we are back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
We are back with the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at the big1050.com. If you are in the market for a new vehicle, I tell folks all the time, you should get on board with Brighton Ford. Looking for a new vehicle? Look no further than Brighton Ford, with an outstanding 4.5-star rating on Facebook from over 750 terrific reviews. They're committed to making you a customer for life. Imagine the convenience of 4 mobile service vans that come directly to your home or workplace for oil changes, recall work, and even light maintenance. And if you can't make it to the dealership, no problem. They'll pick up your vehicle and bring it back to you hassle-free. Is your lease about to expire? Transfer any Ford lease to Brighton Ford effortlessly. They'll even pick up your current lease and drop off your new one right at your door. Experience the knowledge of Brighton Ford without ever stepping foot in the dealership. Don't wait. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD today. Brighton Ford, the official Ford sponsor of the Big 1050 WTKA. Now, fellas, we haven't talked officiating, refereeing, none of that at all day. I know this is right up Craig's alley. I know this is something that people say you just leave and it's just a part of the game. But I think it does bear at least a minor mention that Dusty May was teed up in this game and Tom Izzo was not. That strikes me as a bit odd. That strikes me as a bit odd. Does it not strike you guys as a bit odd, especially on your home floor, when Dusty May hardly says a word to officials in the game?
Like, I just don't understand the motivations behind Big Ten officials. Like, why do they enjoy being treated like Tom Izzo treats them? I feel like this is some sort of sex thing for them. Like, it's a fetish that they have that they desperately need to be held at by a 70-year-old man, and that's the only anyway. It makes no sense. Treat people like you want to be treated. Dusty May's the nicest coach in the league. Maybe Painter's better. I don't know. But
maybe they like Izzo because he does their job for them. Sells doesn't have to work when he plays Michigan State, right? Izzo's just standing on the sideline making all the calls. And he's just, okay, Tom. Yeah.
All right. The other thing we got to talk about is that late in the Nebraska game, they reviewed an out of bounds, and it was clearly out of bounds off of Trey Donaldson.
Yeah.
But also the review showed clearly that he had been hacked across the wrist, which is why he lost control of the ball. So they get the call wrong. They don't call a foul. And then they go to review, and their only option at review is to make the call worse. Because, I mean, it's obviously a foul, but they're not allowed to call the foul, and they have to look at their mistake and then make it worse. That makes no sense. Like, the replay system should be about getting calls more correct, not less correct. And
very, very good point.
Like if you're already at review, you should be able to call foul, like flat out. Or at the very least, you can be like, there was a foul we missed on the play, and it's still Michigan ball. That was a tight game. That was an important call. And they go to the monitor, and for like the 5th time this year, they're looking at the fact that they screwed up. And previously, this is Dusty asking for reviews whenever Vlad Golden gets punched in the face without a call. And it's absurd. The reviews are absurd because for 38 not 58, for 38 minutes in a basketball game, if you rake the ball out of a guy's hands and it goes out of bounds, it's just their ball. And then the last 2 minutes, we're spending 5 minutes with these old men looking at a tiny review monitor for literally 5 minutes to get a call wrong. I mean, what are we doing here? Like, the review system is absolutely busted. And they need to go back in the rule book, and they need to say that if someone is holding the ball and a defender pokes the ball away, unless it hits any part of their body other than their hands, it is still the offense's ball. That will get rid of these changed calls in the last 2 minutes of games. It will get rid of these ridiculous reviews that are taking 5 minutes where the call is the opposite of what the call is in the rest of the game. Like, it's absurd. Like, there are last 2 minutes of a basketball game that are now taking a half hour because of all the reviews.
Yeah, in this particular call, part of the reason why it took so long is the ref who's looking at it, who is, in my opinion, a good ref, Karstensen, and Pfeiffer, who's okay, are looking at something and they realize they've blown the call. They've realized they've blown the call, so now they have to figure out how can we get the ball back to Michigan. And they have a big conference realizing there's no way under the current rules we can actually give the ball to Michigan. This has to be changed. It has to be changed. And Brian, you couldn't be righter about this. If you're playing in street basketball or any other place, or even the Big Ten, for 38 minutes, you hit the ball out of bounds, end of story. It's the other team's ball. Now they're doing these micro views trying to see whose, fingernail it touched last, which has nothing to do with the game. Who hit it out, not who did it touch. And unless, as Brian says, it hits another part of your body, you hit it out, it's the other team's ball. And this one is completely absurd because it falls within that principle. Nebraska hit it out. They hit it out by clobbering Trey. Not only was his arm hacked, he was hit from behind by another guy. The ball goes out of bounds. And somehow, because we have this moronic replay rule, it ends up with Nebraska, which could have been a game, could have changed at that point, completely changed the game. Aside from making the games interminable and impossible to watch, it's just wrong. And whoever came up with this rule never played 2 minutes of basketball.
I can't believe they haven't gotten rid of this. I mean, I have nothing to add as far as the analysis. You're spot on, Brian. I've been on this spot since the beginning, since they created this rule. Everyone said this is the problem, right? You're going to change how the game is played at the end, and then just have a bunch of guys watching tape. And how long has this lasted now? Since 2018? How have they not changed this yet? How are we getting to the end of the season and people are not like, okay, this has got to be changed?
Yeah, we were talking about this when Charles Matthews was on the team.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the first time this came up, where they spent 65 minutes looking to see if this ball touched Charles Matthews' finger after the guy raked it out. Charles Matthews! That's 2 coaches ago. And we're still doing this.
I want to, real quick before we get out of here, I wanted to go around the horn because I know Craig a couple of weeks ago talked Michigan baseball. I know we were coming up in the hockey regular season. Any thoughts, guys, as the start of one season? I know they started real hot, and then I think they lost 3 straight on the baseball side of things, and then of course hockey. Coming up on the end of the regular season here.
Yeah.
Well, let me just speak 1 second before Brian gets to hockey. But, baseball, even though they lost 3 this weekend, it wasn't that bad. I think they lost by 2 runs to Arkansas, who might be the best team in the country. They're certainly a top 5 team. And one of the games they lost, they gave up 14 walks and got 1. I think that's what it was at a game at TCU against a good TCU team, a top 25. I'm very suspicious about the strike zone in that case, but so it wasn't that bad. Michigan baseball is going to be okay, I think. Brian knows about hockey. You can talk about that.
So Michigan's 11th in the pairwise. 16 teams get in. There's always a couple auto bids, so they're pretty close to the bubble. College Hockey News has a pairwise prediction system, and they are 70% to make the tourney. So they're likely to get in, but it's not a guarantee. They finished the regular season at Ohio State, who's right in front of them in pairwise. So they've got that, and then they've got what looks like it should be a home playoff series, as long as they get some points off Ohio State this weekend. So a split is probably good enough, but you really need points this weekend, and hopefully they can come outside of overtime, because Michigan is they've won
They like
6
their extra-
games in overtime. They're 6-0 in overtime, but a lot of those games they had in the third period, and they gave away the leads. So that's been kind of the story of the last 2 years. Is Michigan has been a pretty decent team, and then in the last 5 minutes of a hockey game, they don't play well. But their talent level this year is way down. And just getting in, I think, is a successful season given the composition of this roster. So they're looking like they should do it, but they still have work to do.
They got to split. It just comes down to that.
What you said, the talent level is way down. What do they have coming in? I mean, that's been one of the staples of Brandon Naurato, as he recruits the crap out of this deal. That he's one of the top recruiters in the country. So does he have like a mega class on the horizon?
Well, it's maybe. So the thing is that now CHL players are eligible to play college hockey, and there have been a number of guys who have aged out of the CHL who have committed to, Maine or Vermont or lower level teams, and Michigan hasn't announced anything, but there's a lot of talk in the junior hockey world that Michigan is going after some really high-end CHL players, including Gavin McKenna, who's a stone cold lock to be the first pick of the 2026 draft. So there are a number of guys who are currently playing in the CHL who may or may not be on campus next year. There's been rumors that there's a particularly offensive defenseman that they're after. There's Porter Martone, who's supposed to be the top pick, I think, in this draft or maybe the next number 2. So it's going to be extremely interesting to see exactly what goes down here, because this is the first time that CHL players have ever been eligible. And so the class currently has Cole McKinney and Asher Barnett, who are first, second round picks, but it's not like a flood. And also, Michigan hasn't announced anything for a long time. So they currently have a monster 2026 class. And then after the CHL season ends this year, we're going to see what they do with 25. So it's fascinating. I don't know what's going to happen, but
one of the subplots here is that if you read articles about or look on boards for like CHL fans, they are mentioning Michigan by name as like the reason why they're worried about their talent getting picked off by college now. So
yeah, so it could be spectacular fireworks where Michigan picks up guys who are destined for the top 5, or that could blow over and it wouldn't really happen, and they're still waiting another year for Adam Valentini and Zach Nyman and JP Hurlburt, which is a incredible top 3 for 2026.
I mean, Brian and Seth, don't you think it would be good if Michigan took a part of their 22 or 25 million and designated it for hockey?
I'm sure that there's some of it will go to hockey. Some of it will go to tennis and volleyball. Like, they're not going to spend literally every dime on football, because football can take care of itself, right? Like, I
think the percentage is 75% to football is what he said.
Yeah. The house settlement is not the only money. So
yeah, that's the.
Let's put it that
way.
way.
The thing is like, now the coaches are getting behind NIL. The collectives are kicking into gear, and I think it's going to be easier to get money for football through collectives than it will be for smaller sports, and that money goes farther in smaller sports.
Right?
Because like you might get a starting tackle for $500,000, and you could probably get an entire soccer team for $500,000.
Yeah. So, all right, folks, we got to get out of here. We will see you tomorrow on the Michigan Insider. To my MGoBlog brothers, we'll see you next week. Folks, thanks a lot. Tomorrow, Michigan Insider. Big 1050 WTK.